Welcome back to Breaking Down Storage Tech. Today we're breaking down two unique systems that you can implement for your multi-item sorter system. Now, one is going to be an input and one's going to be a unsorted items output. So this one right here on the left, this is the input, and this basically deals with the switching between items and basically making it more efficient at sorting items, so you have less time in between item types. And then this right here is going to deal with all your items that aren't sorted by your Miss, and so it puts them in shulker boxes and makes them super easy to access with the hopper locking. And this is supposed to be right there. So let's get straight into it. So this was made by SergyD, and yeah, so here will you have your inputs, and this will just run into your regular Miss. I believe this is the Mooney Miss. And I made a video breaking down how this sorts items, and it can sort up to 54 items. And yeah, so this will be where you put your input into the system, and what happens then is it will power this comparator right here. When you power this comparator, it'll power this block, which will unpower this redstone torch. But because it's powering this block, these rails right here keep its power. Now, when it unpowers, it also unpowers this redstone rail right here, which will update this observer right here, which will power this observer and power this block. What also happens is that it powers this dropper right here and then this dropper right here. By powering these two droppers in quick succession, because of the power coming to here and then to this dropper observer right here, it'll cause the dropper or the shears to be shot down and back up in quick succession. In similar fashion to like a dueling hopper splitter is why we do this, because what happens is in that period where the shears isn't there, this comparator will unpower and the line will continue and unlock this hopper, allowing one item to be taken out. Now this is the same kind of idea behind a dueling hopper splitter or a dueling hopper set based on loading rate, which I have videos on both of those, so if you want to go see those, check those out. So yeah, basically by moving it down, this line unlocks and allows the first item to be taken out. And the reason we have a filter here is so that we spend less time. Like if we have a chest right here and we have a scenario where we have items here, here, and here, it is more efficient because with the Mooney Miss, if you see my other video, it'll explain that basically it can sort the same item. It can sort, like if I'm going this stack of redstone, it can sort that at hopper speed. But when you switch between redstone and gray concrete, you have to wait, I believe it's 30 game ticks. Now, if we just unload this like so, what'll happen is we'll have to wait 30 game ticks to switch and then 30 game ticks to switch again. But if we have this filter, it'll unload all of the redstone first before unloading this. So we save a lot of time because we don't have to do as many switches. So that's why we have this filter here. Now what happens then is this comparator will then read it that there's an item here, which will power this wire right here. Now this does a few things. One thing it does is unpowers this redstone torch, which will update this observer and this observer right here, which will cause this and unpower this repeater right here. This basically causes this hopper right here to unlock, allowing items to travel down into the system like so. Now, what also happens is it powers this redstone repeater by powering this block, and it gives full strength to this redstone wire, which will prime this kind of weird contraption using redstone comparators once in subtract mode. Now, what also happens is that you have to know is that this comparator output also has two outputs. One down this line, which goes through here and locks all of these hoppers by powering this redstone torch or unpowering these redstone torches. One thing to note is this hopper will not be powered when this line's on because this redstone wire is going in this direction, so it's not attaching to that. And the other line goes up to here to lock this hopper and this hopper right here. Now, how does this actually work? Well, we also take another signal from this line right here to power this redstone repeater, to unpower this redstone torch right here, to unlock this line right here. And this is just your regular pulse extender using the regular comparator function. What happens then is we basically take a comparator or the output of this pulse extender and put it into this comparator right here. This comparator has a signal strength of 1 coming from this composter. So what happens here is this comparator will power every time that this goes to 1 or less, and then that'll send a signal to here, which subtracts 1 from this line right here, and this is a signal strength of 15 by default, and then when we take away 1, it'll be 14 and just stays there. What happens then is this will keep running, and this will kind of repower going through the system because it'll power, and then this will go, and then it'll go through the clock again, and then take another one. And yeah, so that is how we keep the system unlocked. So if we're running items and we run out of items, it doesn't matter, we still have a clock to allow all the items to go through. Now, what happens when you switch item types? Well, when you switch item types, there will be, this dueling dropper, I guess, actually. No, but basically the alternating between, or the specific timing, which happens from, I don't think I mentioned this. Basically, when this dropper this observer powers this block, it powers this repeater right here, which updates this observer to power the same rail, and this creates a loop. And this is why it alternates between a dropper or the shears alternate between two droppers, and occasionally unlock this hopper to allow items to flow through. What happens if we have something where we're switching item types? Well, if we have the redstone, it'll go into this hopper, and in the period that this line right here actually unlocks, these droppers unlocks to allow the item to flow out, it'll lock again in quick succession, which will cause this hopper to go empty, which will lock this entire system, which will cause this bottom hopper to be locked. So that way, when this line runs again to unlock and let the next item in, this bottom hopper is locked for temporarily, while this signal updates and then goes to update all of this. And that's where we buy the time to allow the previous item to go through and get properly sorted before we send the next item type in. Now, what happens when the system goes empty? Well, we have a comparator output that is currently turning off this redstone torch. But what happens when this chest gets empty is this comparator will go to 0, and in the delay between this redstone torch turning on and this redstone comparator turning off, it will allow these rails to power off. Now, these send quite a few signals, but one signal over here is to this observer to power this block, to power this powered rail right here, as well as this redstone dust right here. And the line going here goes to this block right here to go to this redstone dust to power this concrete and power this redstone dust, which gets also powered by this a couple of ticks later. And this basically starts a pulse extender to power this powered rail right here to keep this dropper both of these droppers powered, so that way both of them can't be moved, or the item can't be moved while the clock dies down, while this redstone torch turns on to keep this rail powered so that this clock no longer runs. So basically we do this to stop any of these filter items and stuff like that from being taken out and any weird stuff from happening. So yeah, a really, really compact and really smart system for keeping the whole thing alive. And if I just put like half a stack of items here, we'll see the clock. We'll see the clock, and if you look at the top, it actually stays. Interesting. So you can see the pulse going to here, and I'm assuming that was fast. You can see that it dips very, very slowly. Keeps a very consistent pulse. That's a very good thing. Now, what happens if we switch item types? Well, if I put a couple of here and then a couple of here, and then we go back to this. So if I go like this, and you can see here, it sorts the item and then it sold it for a little bit. Now it's quite a fast system, but you can see the mis-sorting, and then we have all our outputs here, and we have all the stuff here. Now, if you're wondering how all of this works, I do have a separate video on the Mooney Miss and how great it is. Honestly, one of the greatest Miss systems, I think. Miss stands for multi-item sorter, so you can basically sort a bunch of different items, and I think it's super, super cool. Now, what happens with items like this gray concrete that wasn't sorted by the system? Well, this is where this comes in. This system will basically fill a shulker box with all the items that you have overflow from your system, unsorted, and breaks the box when your whole system locks. And the reason you do this is so that way, if you have any unsorted valuables or stuff like that, you get immediate access to them and you don't have to go crawling in your system. But if it just broke the box every time you locked, but there was no unsorted items, that's kind of a waste of shulker boxes, and you wouldn't want to waste the time to like recycle the whole shulker box. So this only breaks it if items went through it. Now, what happens? Well, we have this chest right here where you would put your unsorted items, and they go into this hopper right here, and this will power this comparator to power this block and unpower this redstone torch. This begins this redstone clock right here, because this will update this observer to power this observer, which will power this observer and power this observer to power this block, and basically restart the whole thing. And basically what we do here is we take an output here to power these two droppers, to power the items coming from this hopper all the way into the shulker box. And then, yeah, so we're shooting the items in the shulker box, but we also take a few other signals. One of those signals being to this block right here to power this note block. This note block will go through, as you can see, this little spiral of observers to power this block and flick this trapdoor. By flicking this trapdoor, we power this observer and this observer to power these two droppers again. This is done so that way when we're swapping boxes or when we're starting up the system, we don't have any overflow coming to the system, or we basically clear all the stuff in the droppers, especially when you're cycling boxes. There we go. Especially when you're cycling boxes, there might be a little bit buildup of here. So when we cycle boxes, we trigger this, so we fire the droppers at faster hopper speeds, because this is going to be powering regardless. This hopper is going to be pushing items into this dropper regardless. The other signal goes all the way across these repeaters to power this block and move this redstone block all the way here through by pushing this piston. Now when we do this, it'll power this redstone repeater and to power this dropper right here. The reason it's a dropper, what happens is we have this redstone repeater will take an output from this redstone block, which will then power this redstone dropper right here. There's a specific reason we would actually choose a dropper right here, because we want it to conduct electricity, or not electricity, conduct a redstone signal, but we also want it to be able to take a comparator output, and this makes it super compact. By keeping it constantly powered, it prevents any of the item that we have in here from getting shot out or any random signals from happening. So we just get the conductivity of this repeater being able to unpower this redstone torch and this comparator right here to be able to take a output from here. Now what happens is this redstone torch will turn off because of the repeater, and this will unpower this redstone repeater right here, which will unpower this block. This will unpower this piston, and this piston. We only want to worry about this piston for now. Basically, by retracting this piston, this comparator will be able to power this block right here. And by powering this block right here, we can power this sticky piston to move this block all the way here. This basically prevents this signal from coming through to firing this iron trapdoor, because it's noisy and the system, once it starts up, can run just fine off of this clock right here. Now, these two pistons are related to the cycling of boxes. And we can cause a cycling of boxes to happen in two ways. One, by locking the system and cause the box to break, or two, by overflowing this box. When we overflow this box right here, what will happen is that the items will start to fill up and like overfill this dropper right here, because this box is full, so the items get stuck in this dropper. This will cause a comparator output to be taken out to power this block and move all of the pistons back. So as you notice, we will repower, unpower this block, and we'll start again this secondary signal. So to keep that in mind. But what also happens is this observer gets moved down and this observer gets moved down. Moved up, sorry. And when it gets moved up, it will update and power this repeater right here to power this block and power this note block and power this piston. This will extend and break the shulker box and send it down the water stream and go all the way down. Now the other signal is this observer moving back to here, where it will update and power this repeater right here to power this observer and power this observer right here, which will power this dropper and dispenser. So you got the dropper here and the dispenser here, and it will power both of them and to replace the shulker box. And we just have a shulker box input here. We can really do whatever we want with it. You can maybe do a side input here, but for now this works. Now, that basically cycles the box, but what happens is we can also run this entire thing from the locking of the hopper, and what happens here is actually a little bit of a unique scenario. What will happen is this redstone, or this sticky piston, will move this observer here to power this block, which will power these rails, updating this observer right here to shove this redstone block to the side and unpower this line, which will cause, because of this redstone torch turning back on and this repeater turning back on, which will cause the same signals before. Now, if we're recycling the box and let's say we're not locking the system and this redstone line's still there, what happens is this will just run as normal until this is cleared, and then everything will go back to normal and this line will retract and we won't have the trapdoor anymore. So yeah, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but this system was designed by Kayzm. I completely forgot because it was in the middle of the video. So really great system. We can see that in action right now. So basically, if I want to load a bunch of items in here, you can see the system run, and then it toggles right here. And let's say that's enough. We'll just let it run. And then we no longer have, or let's say we lock the system. We'll pulse this, and it'll break. And we'll get the item right here, and then we get the shulker box right here. And then you could obviously put this into any kind of input. This is just kind of a place where you would, this is where I've set it up to drop. And you can just put this into a hopper and then put it into a chest. So you have easy access to all items that weren't sorted by your system. So 2 really great systems that you can implement to make your miss even better and even more impressive to your friends. So yeah, thank you for watching.